Welcome everybody, Chef Katie May here. We are live for Delicious Living, and today we're making a rich but refreshing key lime cheesecake. So I'm so glad you're joining us. Let me know in the comments that you can hear me okay. If this is your first time joining us, we are on this show, Delicious Living with Katie May. It's all about whole plant foods. So no added processed sugars or oils. They're often thought to be healthy, but we are all about the whole food. So we're getting the most nutrient dense foods there are and combining them into a fabulous dish that is just full of flavor. And today it just happens to be a cheesecake, but a summertime cheesecake. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. Let me know in the comments that you can hear me okay. And if you like the show, give us a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you get all the future episodes brought to you. And you maybe even hit that little bell and get the notifications. So if we happen to go live when you weren't expecting it, you'll get notified. And the recipe was sent to you in an email today, the cheesecake. But if you are not on our email list, then you didn't get it. And in that case, just hop on to our list and you'll get the recipe sent to you right away. So anyone joining us, it is so warm across the country, I think, in a lot of places, but it's especially warm in my kitchen right now. So I'm just feeling that heat, and I wonder who in the audience can relate. So this dish is high in fat, high in calories, but it is a dessert. So this is not an everyday treat, of course, and not even every weekend would I recommend having something like this that is so rich in calories, especially if you're looking to lose weight. But if you are at your ideal weight, then it's definitely something I think worth knowing how to make a richer item because just human nature, we go towards the richest things there are, right? The richest foods there are. And if you know how to make those foods healthier, then you're not going to be going to the worst things there that you could be eating, right? So it's important to know how to, I say, flex the calories, flex the richness, know how to make those things rich when you want to, but then how to relax that muscle most of the time and have things a little more kind of neutral in the calorie density world. But we can also make things rich without using fats. It's just today we're going to use the fats. We're going to use our nuts and coconut. But you can definitely make rich foods without those nuts. And in this dish, you could even use something like tofu, maybe replace some of it with beans to lower the calorie density. But I'm just going to show you how we're going to do it with all of the nuts and make it full out delicious with the rich fattiness. All right. How's everyone doing? Yeah, you guys are hot too. In Portland, it was 20 degrees hotter a couple days ago, 20 degrees hotter than their average for that day, which is just crazy to me. And of course in California, my home for the last 9 years is seeing a lot of fires. So please keep them in your prayers. So we are making, like I said, a key lime cheesecake today, but this recipe could be made with any fruit flavor, but also lemon. A lemon cheesecake is actually really delicious as well. And I've done that just a few weeks ago. I made a version of this into a lemon cheesecake, but I also did one other thing different, and I'm going to tell you about that later on in the call, which will be super helpful, I think, for anyone looking to enjoy this recipe in a sustainable way. Let's just say that. So to get started, we are going to, let me show you our recipe here. Okay, so the cheesecake has two parts to it, the crust and the cheese, and then a little bit of garnish if you want to add some extra garnish. But we're gonna start with the crust. Macadamia nuts, pistachios, dates, and ginger. Okay, so we have, go back to, we have macadamia nuts here already. These were soaking. You don't need to soak your nuts ahead of time, but macadamia nuts are actually really hard. They're very hard. So in the food processor, it can take a little bit of time to get them processed. So it helps to make them a little moister, softer to begin with. So I'm just gonna strain out that water, and we're gonna put these right into our food processor. Oops. Okay, and I'm using macadamia nut here because it's tropical and it goes well with the lime, but any nuts will work. Pecan, walnut would be great, and a little more of those omega-3 fats. This is going to be for the crust. So the color doesn't matter as much. You can use any nut you like. And then also I'm going to add in some of these pistachios. We're going to do half a cup of the shelled pistachios. I have 1 cup here, so I'm going to take half of this and put it in. Okay. And then our dates. But like I said, the macadamias are really hard, so I'm going to start processing this now before I add any of the dates. All right. And now we're going to add 6 dates. Okay. So I've already had them pitted. These are medjool dates. If you're using deglet dates, I would add 2 to 3 times as many, depending on your preference for sweetness. But deglet dates are usually cheaper in the grocery store, but they don't have the same consistency, not as easy to work with, I would say, and they're not as sweet. So it's up to you. You can use either one though. Then we're going to add a little bit of ginger. So this is ground up ginger for a little extra flavor. I'm going to do a heaping quarter of a teaspoon here, which is half a teaspoon. And we'll process this again. Okay, so this is a good consistency, and I'll show you what this looks like here. Let's switch cameras. We've got some chunkiness. This is in a food processor, not the blender, right? So this is what we want, a little bit of texture here. And you want it to be soft enough where it can kind of crumble in your hands, but also be packed together. If you push this all together, it's going to be packed. So we can use this for the crust, right? And it's my cheesecake pan right here. Now, there's a trick. Before we add our parchment paper here, we need to put down some, or before we add our cheesecake, we need to put down parchment paper. So I've got a sheet here. I'm going to, the quickest way to do this would just be to put it down like this. But what I'm going to do is actually open this up. We're going to cut around here so we can get a base. Now this parchment paper is keeping the cheesecake from sticking. So we're going to use this instead of putting any oil or butter on the pan. And it's also makes it easier for cleaning this pan. But if you want to leave it out, you can by all means do that too. In a way, it's a little more, it's nice to leave it out because then you don't have this paper underneath when you're trying to cut it. So it's up to you whether you want to leave that in or not. And then we can do a round. This is not going to, actually, I've never thought of doing this. It's not going to work as well. So, yeah, I've never done that, but I was just curious what that would look like. Our parchment paper here isn't not long enough to go all the way around. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces here. And you want it to be the at least the height of the cheesecake. It doesn't need to be the height of the entire pan. But it will, it's better to do this a little taller. Okay. And, flimsy papers. Now we can just put this around the edge. If it is kind of curling up on you, you can use a little bit of tape to hold it to the edge, but this is staying really well. Although I didn't close this back up yet. So this is a cheesecake pan, by the way. If you haven't made cheesecake and used a cheesecake pan, this just opens and closes so you can get the cheesecake out easily. And we fit this into the bottom of the pan. Like so. And then we'll put these in. So, oh, interesting, Jan, about the macadamia nuts. I did not realize that. It's not often that I've tried to process them in a food processor, so when I have fresh ones, I never thought about them actually being softer than the times I put them in the food processor. The macadamias were only soaking for less than half an hour, I'd say, about half an hour. And the reason for soaking the nuts too, it reduces any debris that's on the nuts, any contaminants, and it makes the nuts actually a little bit better for our digestion as well. So soaking your nuts is great. Our crust here, I'm just going to put this all into our pan here. And if you wanted to transfer this to a bowl first and then roll it all up into a ball, press it into a ball, you could do that, but it's just going to get pressed flat into the tray anyways. You might as well just start with it here. Let's see if we move this guy. All right. So press it down. You can see how the pistachios had a really nice green color. And of course, pistachios have an amazing flavor. But like I said, you could do any nut you wanted to. And if you're looking to make this a little lower fat, you could actually leave out the nuts and do a dried fruit with the dates, like cranberries, dried cranberries, raisins, mango would be great, a little more tropical. Mango or pineapple is probably what I would do. And what do you guys think? Any questions? Try to get an even consistency here. I'm curious if anyone is interested, has in like a chronometer account or any nutrition account to put in this whole recipe into a nutrition assessment program like Chronometer. I have an account, but I haven't done it before, to put in all of the new ingredients of this recipe so we can actually get a calorie count on the entire recipe, and then divide that by the servings that we would be serving out, and get an idea for people that are curious about the calorie density. But you know what I found in my journey of eating this way is that the restriction of high-fat items is not as powerful as the mental strength that it takes to choose certain foods and to be able to control portion sizes, and to know when your body's full, and to be able to stop eating when you're full, or actually hari hachibu, which means 80% full, so that you don't overeat. I think that is way more important than just avoiding nuts altogether. So that's my personal opinion, but I know there's other reasons to avoid nuts as well than just calories. So I'm just washing my hands here. So we've got our crust done. Soaked, yes, you could use that. I was totally blanking on the grain aspect too. You could use buckwheat or oats would be great instead of the fat for a base to this cheesecake. And I believe I have a graham cracker recipe. You could use that graham cracker recipe as inspiration to make a graham cracker crust, and I might have done that. Actually before, but I don't know that I have a recipe, so I'll have to make one. Okay, so next up is our cheese filling. But before we make the filling aspect, there's a starting piece, the cultured cream cheese. Okay, I just pulled it out because I already have it made. I'm going to show you in a minute, but I want to show you how I make it first. So we have 2 cups of cashews soaked here, and I soak my cashews for usually about 4 hours, 3 to 5 hours, depending on when I get to taking them to the next step. But I don't soak them for a full 8 hours or overnight, because I find that they start turning blue, purple, and it kind of just freaks me out. So just 3 or 4 hours will be enough. And then we're going to add half a cup of water. Actually, another ingredient here. So half a cup to 3/4, maybe even a full cup of water if you didn't do any soaking. It depends on how long you soaked them for, because they will bring in water, and then if you soak them for a long time, you don't need to add as much. That's a great question, Shirley, about how do you know when you're full and not over full? And I think it takes learning what it feels like in your belly. That's a great thing to just pay attention to and be aware, self-aware, and practicing that. But it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing. Like, how do you figure that out? But when you're full, when you're totally full, it's like you don't really want to eat anymore, except when you're eating highly processed foods that bypass, it causes you to overeat anyways. But say you're just eating sweet potatoes and broccoli, no extra high salt, high fatty sauce or anything on top of it, then you're not going to overeat. That's just the beauty of eating a whole food plant-based diet, especially without the salt, because we just will stop eating when we're full. But if you can start paying attention what that feels like when your belly is when you're full and it's like I'm done, I can't eat anymore. If you can prevent getting to that point, and usually if you start paying attention, if you're sitting at a table, if you're being totally present with your food, your meal, you can pick up on that before it gets to the point where you're too full. So that's a great question, and it just takes some mindfulness and paying attention to yourself continually, checking in that way. Okay, so I didn't tell you what I was just adding, but it was miso. This is a fermented soybean product. Usually has a little bit of grain in it. Not always, it might have something else, but another bean or different type of glucose to create the fermentation process. But miso is really nutritious. All the fermentation process is actually really healthy for us, but it is high in salt. So we don't use it especially in my cuisine, and a lot of plant-based people limit the amount of salt they're having. But I would say it's much more common for the plant-based community to use salt, to use tamari and miso than I do here. We really limit the amount we use. And the only reason I'm adding it here is because I need the probiotics. I need that culture to start the fermentation process of the cashews. Cashews, just blended by themselves, will create a delicious, creamy, depending on how thick it is, cream or milk or cheese. But if you add a probiotic, it may be from the miso or a couple other sources, you will create a creamy base that can actually be cultured and fermented. And that's what we want to do here, because that culturing, that fermentation creates a tang, and that's what we love. One of the things we love in cow's milk cheese or goat cheese is that fermented tanginess. Like blue cheese and goat cheese has a lot more. So the more of that culturing fermentation process you can do, the more tang you'll have. And it's not black and white, but often the more flavor and more appetizing it'll be. So it's important to know how to do this when you want to. You don't always need to do this, but a lot of times this will help make a cheese replacement even more cheese-like. Okay, so I'm going to put this on our blender here, and we will blend this up. Because it's so thick, and I might need to add, I'm going to add a little bit more water just to get it started. So I said, remember I said half a cup to 1 cup, and just add a little bit more there. We can use our tamper here because it's so thick. Start the speed at low, turn it on. Not done yet, but I find it very helpful to stop the blending process partway through whenever you're making this cheese, because for 2 reasons. One, you want to give the base a break, the motor, because it's definitely possible to overuse the motor and it will blow on you. I've had that happen multiple times, and it usually comes back to life later on, but You don't want that to happen. The other thing is you can check on it and see that right now it has a gritty consistency. Can you see that? Yeah. There's a little bit of grittiness there. And so that's not what we want for our cream cheese. We want it to be smooth. So we're going to keep processing it, okay? Okay. So it takes a minute, but take a look at this now. Big difference. Okay. That's what we want, a very creamy consistency. Now this cultured cashew cheese, you have in the recipe that you got, there's just 2 recipes there and one of them is this. But this can be used for so many things. I use it in, I think, my ranch dressing, my spinach artichoke dip. It is really fantastic. Fantastic. So what do you do with it once you've done this? We're going to put this into another container really quick. Okay. So you put it into a glass container. Can't be plastic. You don't want any bacteria. You want a clean plastic container. And then we're going to scrape it in here. And you can actually shape these into different shapes, just like you would with any other cheese product. I've done little 6-inch containers, work really well if you want to make this into a baked brie. But when you have a lot like this, it's nice to have like a wider base. And you want room for it to rise. It doesn't rise much, but just a little bit. Because this is fermenting. It's going to be fermenting, and that means it's going to create air pockets. And we can see that, I'll show you in a minute, in the one I have already made. The longer it ferments, the more air pockets will be created. So you want to leave this out once it's all in your jar, your glass container. You leave it on your countertop. If you put this in the fridge, if you let it chill, it's not going to work. You get very little bit of fermentation possibly, but nothing like if you left it on your, just on the countertop or even outside. If you have a good temperature, it's not too cold. And the warmer your room is, or if you do leave it outside, the warmer it is outside, the faster it will ferment. And so I actually just made mine this morning, this other one that I have here, and because it wasn't going to ferment for very long, didn't have long before our show, I turned the oven to a very low temperature. You could either turn the oven to a low temperature or turn the oven up and let it just sit on top of the oven. I was making sweet potatoes and beets, so I turned the oven on and put my cheese on top of the oven, and that just kept it warm. So this is what we have here. You can see there's some air pockets there just because of the layering. But this is the one we just blended, right? I'm going to put this aside now and show you the one I made earlier. So this has only been sitting, like I said, for maybe 12 hours, 10 hours. And you can see a little bit of this was from the way I layered it, you know, just pour it in the bowl like on the one you just saw, but this one has more air pockets. You can see those little air pockets starting, and I can actually smell the fermentation as well. Okay, so this is a science, and if you want to get into cheese making, I would recommend Miyoko Shinner's book. Miyoko Shinner is an amazing chef, and this is actually where I learned this recipe, but she uses salt. And so I wanted to do this with miso. So actually I'm blanking. She uses a yogurt starter. I don't know. The recipe is a little bit different, but it was adapted from her book with her permission, of course. She's just fabulous, but she has a whole book called Artesian Vegan Cheese, and there's lots of different recipes in there that you could do things with, but it is not SOS free, so keep that in mind. It's definitely not oil and salt free. All right. But today we're making this cheesecake, and normally when people make a plant-based cheesecake, they do add some oil. They often add coconut oil. We're not going to add any coconut oil today. Instead, we're going to do coconut milk. Okay, I'll pull it out of the freezer. Get my can opener here. So this is a coconut cream, which is much thicker than just a coconut milk, meaning more fat. We don't want the coconut water that is in a coconut milk can like this. We want the solids. So if you buy your light coconut milk thinking you're going to do yourself a favor and save on the fat here, it's not going to help this recipe. With the cheesecake, we really do want as much fat as possible. So go with a full fat coconut milk, or get the creamer, which will make it even easier because there's more fat there. Okay, and then when you get it home, you have to let it sit still. Let it sit still. You don't have to put it in the freezer. You could just let it sit still on the countertop or in your cabinet. But if you shake it up, it's going to, even when you take it home from the grocery store, it's being shaken up and it's letting the solids and the water mix. What we want is for them to be separate, okay? I'm gonna grab a fork here. And we're gonna put this into our blender. Where did our blender just go? Oh, here. So we have this dirty blender, doesn't need to be cleaned. Don't worry about cleaning it because it's basically the same thing as going back in it, okay? But I'm gonna take this fork, let me show you here. Put our thumb on this camera. Okay, so you could use a little knife or fork. I'm gonna put it in here, and I had this in the freezer because I wanted to make sure that it was very solid before our show today. So it's a little extra hard, but that's a good thing because we want to be able to grab all of the coconut solids without the coconut water. And just kind of cutting through here. Take those big chunks out. And the guar gum, it still has the guar gum in it, which I know I'd rather not have. It's just one more reason that I don't have this often, but when it comes to a dessert, special occasions, and I think it depends on your journey too, where you are in your journey and what your goals are. But yeah. So this is almost got the whole thing. There we go. So you can see there's a little bit more solid in there. We just scoop it up. We want to try to get as little water as possible. Of course, you might hard to avoid all of the water, but what happens when because I froze it, some of that water is actually chunky at the bottom, so I could pick that water up with a fork, kind of slushy like. But we don't want that slushiness. Okay. So now that was the coconut, that was a full fat coconut milk. This is the coconut cream. And this doesn't, and we're putting in about 2 cups of this coconut. Oh, John is on our show, and I just made him this a couple weeks ago, and he was saying he ate the whole thing. So we've still got the solid up there at the top, but the rest of in this coconut cream, there's less water, but there's a lot more cream that is not solid. So we can take some of that. And it's really about getting a consistency that works. So we'll blend this up and see how it's looking. You see I'm making a mess here. It's kind of messy. All right. So that should be good to start with. Oh, millet. Millet and cashews for the crust, I'm guessing. Sounds great. You can use a can opener, puncture the bottom of the can and drain the water. Oh, interesting. Rhonda, good tip there. About poking a hole in the bottom and draining the water first. That's great. So the next thing we need to add here is our cashew cheese. Okay? And we're going to add in, calls for 2 cups. I'm not sure how much this is exactly. So let's measure it out and we'll see. And this cultured cashew cheese will thicken up a little bit on you, but not too much. It's more about it just rising, fermenting. And we are a little bit short. So I made 2 cups of, this was 2 cups of cashew soaked, and it made just under 2 cups of the cream, the cultured cashew cream. And this is going to be enough. Okay? Because this isn't an exact science. We just want a sweet and creamy, thick consistency here. But we also want to add in our dates. So I'm going to put our dates at the bottom. Well, not the bottom, the middle here, because I want them to get to the blade faster. So I'm breaking these date pieces in half. And I know this is a lot of dates, but cheesecake usually has a lot of fat, and then it also has a lot of sugar. We're not using white sugar, so we're putting in whole dates here for the sweetness, but you could use other dried fruit if you wanted to. Also, we're going to do a little bit of spinach here. So the spinach is for added color, added nutrients and color, and we'll just put in about half a cup here. We'll push that all down. And then we want our lime juice as well. Oh. Okay. Virginia, I'm not sure what program you're using about sending it, but where you're sending it to. Let us know if that works out, what you learn. Okay. We have a little knife. I've already zested 4 of these limes. I took the zest off first before you juice it. The zest is just the peel of the lime, and it has natural oils in it that add so much flavor. So this is going to make our cheesecake extra limey, which is important because we're not using any lime juice or anything. I mean, no, our of course we're using lime juice. We're not using any store-bought juice. I'm missing, oh, here we go. Okay, here's our grater. But you know, this isn't a highly processed cheesecake you're buying at the store where they can add artificial flavors to increase the concentration of a flavor like lime. They might add extra concentrated lime or artificial flavoring to make it really strong flavor. We're not doing that, so it's important that you add in the lime zest. And this is a microplane. I'm just scraping the lime on the microplane for 2 or 3 scrapes, and then it gives you the white pill. You see the white membrane there? We don't want that white part. We just want the green skin. So you just keep turning it until you've gotten most of the skin in your bowl. And we're doing 5 limes today. That's what the recipe calls for. So we do that first, and then we will juice our limes. Okay. We can dump all of this right into, if you want to actually save, we'll save just a little bit. We can sprinkle on top with the pistachios. And now we have these limes to juice. Any questions? The cream cheese, you know, I've not frozen it. If you want to ferment it, if you want it fermented, you need to do that before freezing it. And then you can freeze it. And I don't know exactly how that works out. I haven't tried that because of the reasons I talked about in the beginning of not wanting too many fats in my diet, and also because I do have a tendency to get attached to rich things. Working on that mindfulness practice myself. I don't make the cheese a lot. I also have a thyroid issue, so I can gain weight really easily. But I know that the cheese can be made ahead of time and stored for a very long time in a cool place. It doesn't need to be as cold as a freezer, but you can learn more about that in Miyoko's book. Maybe at some point we'll do a class on that. And the cheeses store really well at cold temperatures. And that's kind of a slow aging process. If you keep them cold enough where they won't go bad on you, but warm enough where they can continue to age. Okay. The microplane, yep, it's called the microplane. That is the brand. Okay, so now you've got all your lime in there. And I want to show you this. That's the brand. It's very common microplane, you'll see. All right, now I'm going to add our cream cheese. Actually, let's blend this up first before we add any of the cream cheese here. We'll get that going because those dates are kind of rough to blend. We're going to use our tamper again here. Okay, so I'll show you this. It's what we have started, and it's going to be pretty full in this smaller Vitamix container, but we can add in our cheesecake here, or our cream cheese. Just pour that right in there. Okay. Now we'll blend it one more time. Okay. So make sure your lid's on. Start it low. Notice how I went up slowly? Most of the time with the Vitamix, I'm like, just turn it all the way up really fast because there's no need to go slow. But with this being so full, I was very careful about starting it slow because I didn't want anything to be, forced out the top, or even for the top to be forced off itself. Okay, so we have thanks for working with me on just changing cameras and everything. It can take some time, and one day I'll have a camera assistant helping. All right, we have a little bit here at the top that didn't get mixed in. We can just stir that in really easily. And then we're going to pour this into our cheesecake. Right? So we have this pan here. Now what I can do, let's do both cameras like this. There we go. We have this beautiful green color. It's a light green, like a lime, light lime green, pastel-y almost. You want to use a spatula to get all of the mix out of here. Don't waste any of this. Now, this is going into our freezer. You could put it just in the fridge too. You could leave it in the fridge overnight, at least 6 hours or so for it to firm up. But I find that it works best in the freezer. If we store it in the freezer, and it should be sliceable within a couple hours, but I actually like leaving it overnight for a longer period of time in the freezer, and that way it's really solid when you bring it out. And once you have it soft enough to cut it, So you bring it out, if it's fully frozen, bring it out and then let it sit for half an hour or so. It'll soften up on you. And then you can cut it to serve, or what I recommend is slicing it all ahead of time. You know, maybe right then you serve a piece to you and anyone else who's eating wants to eat then, but then you continue to slice the rest of it so that you can then package it in individual serving sizes. Okay, so I would do small slices personally. You can always have more than one slice if you really want to, but at least starting off with a small serving, and then you can go back for more if you feel like you really need it. But I find that it's so decadent and so rich that you only need a little slice. Okay, and when you slice all those pieces, then you can store them back in the freezer, and they'll last for a long time, probably a couple months. I don't know that they ever last that long in my home, but they could, they would, if you wanted to. So to store them in those individual pieces, you want to wrap them in plastic. It's just saran wrap that works. But I know we don't want plastic touching our food. So what I would recommend is putting parchment paper around the cheesecake first and then wrapping it in the plastic. Okay? I do not want that plastic wrap touching the food. So parchment paper first and then the plastic wrap. And you can wrap each one individually and then store them in the freezer. Okay? So just, that works a little bit better. But you can see how wet this is. So it's important to use as little water as possible when you're making that cheese, and getting as much of the thick coconut solids as you can and as little of the coconut water, because we want this to turn out really nice and solid once it's frozen. So it will be wet like this. That's to be expected, but you just try to minimize that extra moisture. Oh, thanks, Jessie. Virginia gives us this info. I might have missed your calorie count, but dietary fiber, interesting. Cholesterol 0. Sorry guys, I'm so interested. I'll have to go back and look at all your notes afterwards, but we did get calories, 487 calories per serving. How many servings did you say? That's what we need to know. Maybe you wrote it somewhere, but if you want to say it again, that would be great. Let us know how many servings. I would say you could easily get 12 servings out of here, 12 that you could store and in those individual slices. But you could do more, especially if you were serving this just individually without the, without storing it in the freezer. You could just slice littler pieces, because I know I want just a tiny slice, and then I enjoy it. Be really mindful as I'm eating it, and then let it sit. And after some time of letting it sit, and then if you're still hungry and you want more, then you can go back. So 10 servings, I would knock that up to 12 servings. Personally, I would definitely cut each quarter into 3. All right. Now, I said I was going to tell you 2 ways to store this so that you didn't overdo it. You could pace yourself getting through this cheesecake. The other way is to portion this into little tart size cheesecakes. Instead of doing a big cheesecake, you can get like a mini, either a tart pan, some sort of baked good baking pan that has smaller containers. Even just a cupcake or a mini cupcake container would work really well. I did this in I think I would say it was a standard size cupcake pan. This is when I made the lemon cheesecake. I made this cheesecake with a couple alterations. Instead of the lime, I used lemon. I left out the spinach altogether. I actually put in a few chocolate chips in the base of the crust and left out the ginger. It was for my dad's birthday, so it was kind of a chocolate lemon cheesecake, and it was amazing. Everyone loved it. There was little kids at the party. They loved it. This was for Father's Day, so just a couple months ago, and it was a huge hit. There were just these little cheesecakes, and in proportion, there was actually a lot less of the cheese filling per crust, and it worked really well. People loved it, especially the kids. They were asking for more, and they lasted a long, well, there were a lot of people that wanted them, but I would say it was definitely helpful because we were enjoying them all week long. So that's a great way to do this. And then you don't have to worry about slicing this and wrapping them individually. I would just go with those other ones. And those little ones was actually so satisfying, just a tiny little cheesecake like this. So when I'm talking about you being able to cut this into 12 pieces and it be satisfying enough, I'm 100% certain that it's enough. And in fact, I would actually go a little bit smaller, like I said, if it was just serving it in the moment. So those little ones are a great option. Oh, so glad you guys are all here. Just seeing. If you made the lemon, I wouldn't add the spinach, unless you wanted it to be slightly green, but I would leave out the spinach. You could add just a pinch of turmeric or even a little bit of nutritional yeast, but nutritional yeast is going to add more savoriness, but it is cheese-like, so you could do a little nutritional yeast and just a touch of turmeric if you want more of the yellow coloring. But definitely, if you do the lemons, continue to use the lemon zest as well. And normally, you can sprinkle the pistachios on right now. Let's show you. I'm going to just kind of roughly chop my pistachios here. Put it in this pan. So we've got whole pistachios, shelled pistachios. We just roughly chop these in just smaller pieces, and then we can crumble it over top of our cheesecake. Okay. Making sure I get everyone chopped at least once, and then bring the cheesecake back into view. And just sprinkle these on top. And this is totally unnecessary. From a fat standpoint, you probably want to leave this off, but from a presentation standpoint, it's really pretty. You could also slice another lime or a couple limes, make thin slices, and place those across the top for a little pretty presentation that wouldn't add any more fat. And if you wanted to get fancy with the lemon zester, or not this one, not this microplane, not a grater, but an actual zester where you could zest the lime into longer pieces. Zest the lime skin into longer pieces, and that would be really pretty presentation here too. Since I just have a little grated pieces here, sprinkle these on. All right, so there we go. So, how's everyone enjoying this? What do you think? You make it this weekend, maybe save it for Labor Day. This would be a fantastic dish to have for a big holiday like Labor Day, even if you don't have a ton of people over, just you and your family or whatever you're doing. If it's just you or just you and a partner, you can make those little cheesecakes and put it in the freezer so you can have it all week long or even all month long. Like I said in the beginning, it is hot here, it's hot everywhere for the most part. So this is a great little treat. And out of the freezer is really nice too because it's colder, right? Right now, if you just did it like room temperature, it just doesn't have that chill factor. So definitely put this into the freezer. And when you pull it out, just let it sit. If it's like this, let it sit for maybe half an hour and then try cutting it. If it's the little cheesecakes, you actually don't need to let it sit for very long. But it depends on the individual person and whether they want it a little bit harder or not so hard. So, guys, a lot is happening in the world, and I just want to tell you how much love I have for each of you, and that no matter what your beliefs are or opinions are or the challenges you're facing, maybe in some cognitive dissonance around what's happening and a lot of the truths that are being unveiled, a lot of the corruption that's being unveiled, and there's a lot of disagreement basically between everyone online. I just want to tell you that it doesn't matter. That disagreement doesn't matter. We're all one, and we're all coming from I hope. I know not everyone in the world is connected to their heart space, but I believe that everyone here, anyone that's a part of this community, is absolutely coming from their heart and acting from that space. So I just want you to know, if anyone's following me on social media, if you're not, I encourage you to do so. I might say some things, I might post some things that you don't believe, but I believe them, and that's based on my experience. And it may seem like a lot of our community is older than I am. It's just the way it is. Most people come to a plant-based diet when it's life or death. And so, age doesn't matter, but I'm just saying it may seem like I'm young and I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes based on these topics. I didn't expect to get into this, but I think it's important to talk about. And people have told me to stay in my lane. I do nutrition, I do cooking, and I should just focus on that. But this is too big of everything that's happening right now is just too big to stay silent. And I encourage each of you to speak your truth and to stand up for what you believe in. I spent many years from a young child when I was promoting animal equality, animal welfare, and the biodiversity of the environment, and just loving on the animals and speaking for those that didn't have a voice then when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and kind of being suppressed by my family, who didn't have any ill intentions, but just didn't resonate with what I was saying, to being in high school and wanting to be a doctor and super excited about being a doctor. But as I learned about natural medicine in Europe, I was committed to never prescribing medications, never prescribing pharmaceutical medications, and I would help heal people through natural, I didn't know it at the time that it'd be food, but through natural methods. And I stood by that regardless of people telling me that I couldn't do that and that was bogus and quackery and stuff like that. And then coming to Bastyr University, which is actually just around the corner here in Seattle, Bastyr University, they taught all natural practices, no pharmaceutical medicines, nutrition, supplements, and yet they were not promoting a whole food plant-based diet for reversing chronic disease. I was in a master's program for nutrition at a natural college, and they were still not promoting a whole food plant-based diet. Could you imagine? knowing what we know about the science of reversing disease, and they were still not promoting that. But I stood my ground and I found the doctors that I wanted to work with in Santa Rosa and came to True North and Dr. McDougall's program. And lo and behold, it works. We reverse disease. We get rid of the obesity. We transform lives and bring people back to life. And doctor after doctor after doctor, even nutritionists, will tell you it's not possible. Until this day, people are still saying it's not possible. But we know better. We know that there is truth that's not being told in the mainstream media, in conventional medicine. And so it boggles my mind that anyone in the plant-based community could question or be not questioning the authority when it comes to the issues that we are facing now, from COVID to the vaccine, to everything else that is being talked about, as whether it's a conspiracy theory or it's actually, just it's the truth. I mean, and that's what conspiracy theories are often. But conspiracy theories are conspiracy theorists are really people that are just willing to think critically about things and do the research and not buy into anything mainstream media propaganda that they're being told. They're just willing to go deeper. And so if you are resonating with any of this, even the fact that it's just about being one and being loving and accepting regardless of any opinions you see out there. I hope that you can act on that. I hope that you can share that energy with people. Share your truth, but also share your love and compassion regardless of any other story or information that's being told and everything. So I haven't read through any of these comments. I don't think I could do that before we end because there'll be too much to say. But I want you to know that I love you, and I want you guys to be learning how to eat this way, not just learning it, because a lot of you are actually already been doing this for some time, but practicing it, building your kitchen fitness, making this your reality, making it your everyday, making it easy to do so that you can actually heal on the inside, heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and you may not realize it, but you will actually be healing spiritually. You're healing your energy and your thoughts and your vibration just by cleaning up your diet and getting rid of the toxins. And that will actually allow you to live a more full life, which I think everyone is realizing how meaningful that is, and having so much gratitude for what we do have in this beautiful life through this lockdown that we've been experiencing. So if there's anything you could do for yourself, I think that it is eating really well, nourishing yourself for not just those physical ailments, but also for your mood, boosting your mood and keeping you calm and peaceful through all of these the stressful times. And yeah, so I'm a little bit of rambling, but I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys connected with everything I said, or some of it, and enjoy your cheesecake. This, I wish I could show you, but this has to go into the freezer. I'm going to let it sit overnight, and I'll be posting pictures. Like I said, you can follow me on social media. I'm at the Culinary Gym on Facebook, the Culinary Gym Facebook page, and then also the Culinary Gym on Instagram, and Chef Katie May on Instagram. And I'm just starting, the last month or so, I started posting a little bit more. And the Culinary Gym is mostly about food, a little bit about other areas of health. And Chef Katie May is actually not about the food. It's about my passions outside of the kitchen and my life and how I'm spending that time. So anyways, I love you all. Have a wonderful, delicious weekend, and I will see you next week.